Folks, so occasionally, you know, we talk about a person, and that person gets us in trouble because everyone thinks we simp for him. And the problem is that when we agree with somebody, the issue we get into is that we're suddenly simping for them. We've agreed with Demon Mama. We've also had quite a bit of negative, you know, somewhat, you know, just contentious issues with Demon Mama in recent history.
Yeah.
That doesn't get remembered. What remembers is we took someone's side on anything. The self-diagnosis discourse, which was nonsense because it meant self-assessment. That's not how diagnosis works. They're codes to be able to bill insurance. Shut up. But occasionally I come across a video on my feed that I feel like I need to watch and get a sense of, because I don't know where I stand. And after watching this video, what I came to the realization of is that I actually, for the most part, agree. And this is coming from someone who has done a ton of entheogens. Just a ton. Ketamine in the fountain. It's a thing I did. I don't recommend that. We're going to watch a 10-minute video from Coconut Island. And so this is a discussion of Voosh talking about drug use, making his chat very mad. I agree with the thrust of this, and I want to go through it and kind of point out why. If you are Vosh averse, just come back in like 20 minutes, get a drink, fillet your partner, make some bread. I don't know, whatever you want to do for 20 minutes. I don't care.
Friendly reminder that Jess and I are both of the same mind on this stuff generally. If we're not, we'll speak up. But simple fact is, only one of us can be talking at once. So sometimes you might hear Jess talking, or you might hear me talking. But keep in mind that we generally have a chance to kind of synthesize our thinking together beforehand. So,
yep.
You know, just pretend like we're both talking if it's just one of us, okay?
I mean, this person has their own song by the amazing Sweet Myths. Maybe someday Jess and Zena will have that prestige.
I know, right? That'd be so cool.
That level of internet clout. But that's probably a far way away, maybe, 7-8 years. I don't know. So we'll see. Anyway, so let's get into it.
Vosh, why are you so anti-drug? It's one of the opinions that I don't really understand. It seems like you are against THC and psyches, while you don't heavily condone alcohol from what I see. I don't like it when anybody uses any kind of chemical to escape their brain state as a way of coping with problems. Taking drugs or whatever else will essentially never fix problems in your life. Sometimes you hear people like microdosing shrooms, and that like gets rid of their depression, but this is not the case for the vast majority of people who use drugs. The issue is there are a lot of people who use drugs as a coping mechanism, and while I understand that that can be beneficial, oftentimes I think this impedes people in their attempts to make their lives better. So that's the thing that I really take issue with. But I don't have an inherent moral.
So right then and there, I don't actually understand where anyone could have a contention with this.
Yeah, same here. I think the only thing I would do is expand a little bit. I know there is more research going into a couple different drugs. So things like ketamine. Is there any others, Jess?
Which ones?
I was just expanding. The thing that Vosh mentioned was there's a few drugs that, people try that help their depression, but by and large. But the thing I wanted to expand on with that was that there is a few drugs that there's
MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin, DMT.
And they are currently in research for the effectiveness of that.
And
right?
Here's what I'll say is that, Inky, I actually, and I love you. I hope we're still friends after this, for the love of God. But because people get mad at me, I would say that I don't hear any judgment there. Not one bit. I would actually say that I don't hear any judgment from that. I would say that he's talking about a very specific use of drugs that I think needs to be called out. There's a tendency to have a very laissez-faire attitude to this stuff, and I think that I find myself very uncomfortable. As a person who can't be around pot smoke because it will hurt me, it will cause a migraine, and it will knock them clean out.
Oh, yeah, I will be hurting for days.
There is a way that people choose these medications in some cases, not because they are dealing with a medical issue, not just as a fun thing to do occasionally, like, say, getting a glass of wine, but I take it as when someone is using it to escape something from themselves. And I don't mean pain regulation. That's a different discussion. What I'm talking about is specifically when somebody becomes potentially dependent on a medication that in a lot of ways ends up causing problems. Because there's a point where some escapism can be good, and he'll cover this, but sometimes that escapism can go too far. I'll tell you more about a story about my friend Adam later.
Well, and I think the thing to note is the language that he's using to say this. You know, there's a lot of like, if I remember right from where I was seeing you before, there's a lot of like, this isn't beneficial to solving your issues, right? Or to solving the things going on. You know, and so that's not the same language as somebody being really judgmental about it, I think, right?
Yeah. I think Holic Master has a pretty good idea of how that works. Nerd King, I'd be curious how you think he's not seeing the big picture. I think we're like 45 seconds in. So I actually don't think you can make that claim. I think you're jumping to conclusions. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would say sex can be an exclusionary coping mechanism that can be harmful. I would say lots of things are. But right now we're just talking about drugs. Like, I notice that people are getting really, really defensive, and I would really caution you to not fall in the same trap that his chat does. So just let's listen to this for a bit and see what we can get into.
Moral problem with drug use or anything like that. Bad take, Vosh? Well, everyone hates this take.
He literally just said, I don't have a moral problem with taking drugs. So anyone who said judgmentalness, judgment comes down from a moral or a ethical argument. That's not what's happening here. Let's move on.
And by everyone, I mean the drug users. They never like it. Keep in mind, the only take that I've made here is that using drugs for escapism to avoid dealing with your problems is bad. Taking issue with that says more about you than it does about my take. The data doesn't really agree with you, Vosh. Nothing that I said right there can be disagreed with data. Legit, the only reason I started doing more stuff was me quitting pot. Yeah, marijuana use is one of those insidious things that a lot of people think is more innocuous than it really is. Doing a lot of weed, doing it frequently, can make you slow and lazy. But being lazy is bad, actually. Leisure is good. The ability to engage in leisure is good. Having free time is good. But being lazy means that if there are things that you need to do, you don't do them. Lazy is always a negative thing because it's a reference to your...
So I will contend with one language piece that Vosh is using. I actually, when working with clients, never use the word lazy because it is so easy for it to turn into a shame loop. The term I actually prefer 9 times out of 10 is I actually prefer to describe it as there is some way in which you are not currently being incentivized. The problem is that I know of a person, I'm going to call him Adam, who was a dear friend since high school. And for basically his 20s, he lived in a 10-year haze of pot. Now, I would never describe Adam as lazy. He worked full-time. He was working in restaurants, even went to culinary arts school. But his ability to function, his ability to cognize, I saw a very bright person turn into somebody slow and unwilling to engage. So on the one hand, while I don't like the language of the word lazy, I do think that the term he should be using, more of this description of this sort of slowness, this lack of engagement, this lack of incentivization. Can pot change that? Yeah, there's such thing as psychological addiction. I agree with him that this is treated as innocuous. I don't think it always is. I smoked a fuck ton of pot. I don't think this is like a soft drug. It's not super, it's not something that is like just taking a 5 milligram Adderall. It's getting into bimbofication shaming. I mean, depending on how far the bimbofication goes, I will fight you on that. But also, it's not my thing. But also, the fact of the matter is that, like, also, if you're using kink as a means of escaping reality on a regular basis, I also think that's a problem. This is why I don't like 24-hour kinks play, which is why we should be talking about why people use it. Yes, because of depression and things like that. I agree that the term laziness isn't great. Yeah, we all suffer under capitalism. But the fact is that running from that makes a person unwilling to engage, and you see these same people unwilling to actually take action.
So I'm going to nudge all of you, because the thing is that it is really easy to get up and get in the thinky brain and have all of these thoughts and opinions and all of that right away. We're only 1:44 in. This is also only one of his videos. I know Vosh has gone over these kinds of topics in all sorts of different ways over the years, right? And I've heard him talk about all sorts of different topics that are related to this one too, or tangentially related, right? Somebody brought up, poverty and circumstances that lead people there, and lead people to either poverty or drug use, right? I know Vosh has talked on a range of things so far. So do me a favor.
Hear it out and try to put aside your judgments. If at the end of this you still feel like those judgments are relevant, that's great. Try to hear his arguments, hear our critiques of those arguments, and then go into it. Also, I see so many people in both chats using this argument of anything can be used in excess. I'm not accepting that as an argument. It's a dodge. Things that psychoactively change your perception of reality, as someone who's done significant amounts of entheogens and hallucinogens, no, this is not the same thing. Yes, you can become dependent on multiple things. Again, people can become dependent on food, totally dependent on kink, all sorts of, but we're talking about psychoactive, chemically enforced states. No, you meant that to agree. That's fine. I'm not singling you out, Speedy. I'm actually singling out, there's been a few other people who have made that argument. I'm just singling out that argument specifically in the negative. In the positive, it's fine. Going rampant, that's fine. I get that you weren't totally serious. Though, again, there is an argument to be made there. Kink can be used as a type of escapism, which is fine in the small term, just like playing a video game or anything else. But we get onto this. So
Yep.
Your inability to do things that you need to do. It's not just, you have lots of free time or whatever. And smoking weed does make you lazy. It has to. That's what it does to your brain for most people.
Again,
yeah,
not
Bosch,
good
please
language.
Encourage no getting high before 4:20 unironically. Yeah, it's like no
The
drinking
definition
before
is
5.
fine,
No
even if
smoking weed
that's
before
not the right
language,
word you
yeah.
would use. Yeah.
I gotta say, I've started taking small THC gummies every day to help with my PTSD, OCD, and anxiety. It's really helped me. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Like I said, I don't have an inherent moral problem with drug use at all. I mean, I drink coffee. I obviously don't think that drinking coffee is like a morally bad thing. Do you have the same take for SSRIs and antidepressant / anti-anxiety
Notice
medication?
the way his chat misses
Those
the point.
medications are prescribed in order to let your brain chemicals reach a point where you can be functional. If they're
Vosh is actually incorrect with one thing here that I'm going to point out. We were going to do a segment on this on probably Friday or Sunday. And that is, recent evidence has shown that SSRIs, anti-anxiety meds, things like that, funny story, what we thought they were doing, which was changing your brain chemistry specifically to do, fix what we call chemical imbalances. That's not what they do. In fact, we actually found out that's not how they work. In fact, we're not entirely sure what they're doing. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean stop taking your meds. That means that their efficacy is still well researched. They still work. They still had to go through FDA regulation. But what it means is that we're not entirely sure the mechanism that's creating that thing. I'm not just going to go off my Cymbalta just because we're not entirely sure the functioning. His framing of this is a particular way of doing things. It's an older view, but I understand why he has it. He'll mention this in a moment, but he has bipolar and takes lithium, so I understand why he has that view. But
And a lot of people got taught the
chemical imbalance.
That most lay people probably in the U.S. probably have that as their framework. So changing that is going to take some time.
being used properly, then they're absolutely not a form of escapism. In fact, they're the opposite. They're meant to align your brain more closely
Thank you,
with
Kira.
reality as it is. In the way that depression and anxiety lie to you, the medications are meant to straighten your brain out, get you more on the ball with reality. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can do with SSRIs that would...
Just therapist stepping in here for a minute. What he said there just now about anxiety and depression lying to you, this is absolutely correct. The negative thought processes, if you have not watched our
Distorted
Thinking series, I don't know why you haven't. It's been up forever. If I have to fucking redo it with Zena, we will. But the Distorted Thinking series is talking about these exact places your mind goes. These are the lies that your anxiety and your depression tell you to keep you stuck, right? So the kid he's talking about is that when he says this lies, it's absolutely the case. It is shame loops that are based not in reality, but based on your insecurities, based on the narratives that your parents taught you. They are just simply not true. Okay? So just be aware of that. It's important.
Constitute escapism, but maybe. Nothing that I know about. Are you against going to the doctor if you get hurt? Yes. Simply perish. I'm prescribed weed. You see the defensiveness of these people? You see this? At what point exactly have I said, anytime you do weed, it's bad? But that's what they hear. They're very defensive about their drug use, which again, might indicate that they're using it irresponsibly. Because if they were using it responsibly, they would never hear using this as escapism can be bad, and think, oh, I'm being attacked here. It really makes me wonder, is escapism bad? Escapism to get through life is bad. Escapism as part of like media consumption is totally fine. Like if it's like, oh, a video game, wow, I am the Doomslayer, whatever. Okay, fine, you know. But there's a big difference, I think, between experiencing art that's meant to take you somewhere else conceptually and
So I just have to interject on this whole thing for a second as a therapist, is that escapism is a necessary thing. There's a reason why we watch shows. There's a reason why we play video games. There's a reason why sometimes people, want to smoke pot once every, week or whenever. I mean, he's really not
No,
engaged.
yeah.
I don't hear that at all. As someone who's torn apart the DARE program, I don't see that at all. I love you dearly, but yeah. Here's the thing. And what I really appreciate about this is that in some ways, the argument that he just made about video games and other types of escapism, you need these things. Humans are not made to really, in my opinion, this is my opinion, constantly be involved with the rest of the world. I don't think our brains know how to deal with world news or world politics. I don't know if we know how to deal with these huge mechanistic systems that exist, post-colonialization, current colonialization, white supremacy, all of these things that have happened throughout history, these massive systems, even the supply chains, trying to explain them to somebody is impossible because I don't think anyone's really got a grip on them. They've existed and they've created these incredibly interconnected, inter-objective systems. So when you're talking about this stuff, one of the things you have to get into is, yes, escapism's good. You should take breaks off Twitter. You should go
Touch grass.
touch grass. That's a form of escapism. We tell people to do it all the time. And yet, if you spend your entire life playing video games, that's a problem. Just like I'm not a big fan of 24/7 kink, I'm not a big fan of 24/7 engagement. Doom scrolling hurts you. Relying on the dopamine from Twitter hurts you. And so we have to get really clear on this, is that what we're really kind of pointing at is if there's any kind of condemnation here, and it's not a moral one, it's not an ethical one. Instead, it seems to be a more logistical one, right? Or utilitarian one.
Like the pros and cons of the situation, right?
Yeah. We're weighing
cost-benefit.
out the thing, and it's basically escapism has its place, but in its excess, due to psychoactive substances, this can lead to some very real negative outcomes. And there are drugs, such as, for example, cannabis, that are used by many people as a means to deal with systems that need to be fixed. Rather than being able to change those systems, people then rely on these states to sort of disappear into. In spiritual communities, and this is the Zen part of me talking, we would call these state chasers. They're people who get into energetic states, people who get into meditative states. And the problem is that they'll live in these states of highness, right? Oh, I'm touching the angels, I'm doing all this stuff. And guess what? They don't interact with reality. Everything is all white light instead of actually like dealing with the darkness that is kind of part of things. The universe is chaotic. We live in a universe where it's necessary to kill in order to live. And you can be like, well, I'm a vegan. You're still eating plants. Again, this is, to me, I would say the argument here is that escapism is okay, but from a Zen perspective, escapism is merely a way by which to let off steam from the ego, but it is not the goal, right? So that's kind of the side Zen take on that. Did you have something you want to add?
Nope.
Okay, let's go.
Solid, yeah.
Let's go.
Ingesting like chemicals that are meant to remove you from reality. I think there's a big difference there. Though of course you can get addicted to video games. If you
True.
if you get sufficiently addicted to some kinds of media intake, you can have similar issues. Of course, drugs directly affect your brain chemistry, whereas art affects it indirectly. So there's there is a difference there. Literally just said they are prescribed at Vosh. You're making a dependency argument. They're so mad. I'm not making a dependency argument. I depend on coffee. I'm talking about escapism. If people depend on, what, anti-anxiety medications because they have anxiety, that's not escapism. That doesn't make them, that's not them escaping reality. At Vosh, I literally only got together after binging PCP learn about it. Dude, they're so mad every time this happens. Maybe the drug use really did addle your feeble minds. You're hearing things that I'm not saying. This happens every time I talk about the drug thing. I say, hey, habitual use as a form of escapism to avoid dealing with your problems is bad. And everyone's like, well, my totally different situation is fine. You know, it's like, okay, thank you for letting me know. I take lithium, bicarbonate. I take Adderall.
Anytime you're not dealing with your problems, that might be a clue that something is going on. That might be bad. Just need to clarify right there.
Yeah, earlier I saw...
we gotta stay on task because that's all over the place.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, Inky, my dear Inky had said, I'm not sure what goals I'm comfortable assigning to others. Sounds like an interesting topic to explore. So what I would say, Vosh is smug and people like to fuck with him. Fair. So here's the thing. I would say your thing about assigning, again, even if we just come up with hypothetical individuals, I can actually point to people and go, based on their behavior, there seems to be a level of escapism here. Like, for example, the person I mentioned earlier, I know what that kid went through. I know because I was around during it, and I know what they were escaping. Hegemonic, patriarchal violence. And so the thing is that, yeah, escapism is a really great way to escape that. In fact, I see this weirdly enough with like the pot stuff. I see that actually happen more with men because it's a great way to sort of de-emphasize hypermasculinity.
And I take coffee. Clearly, I'm not against the concept of using drugs. Isn't acid good because it shows you how the world really is? No, acid does not show you how the world really is. The closest you will ever get to seeing the world as it really is when you are completely sober. All of the mechanisms in your head that allow you to detect empirical reality.
I'm going to throw a little post-Kantian in there. I disagree with this. I will throw this out there. Acid is... I cannot in any way recommend acid. I know what it did for me. I like it. But if you look at the way tryptamines affect the actual like brain, no, it is changing the way you perceive things. Now, you can argue that's a reality. I don't, mind you, because... And I do love Robert Anton Wilson. Inky, you're proving your clout here. Our Raw is fucking amazing. But here's the thing, and I gotta be really clear on this. Even entheogens can be used for escapism, and I think there's an argument to be used for doing things like therapy and being able to get through some level of personal, internal, psychological blockages based on the use of psychedelics. I got through a lot of my shit that way. The post-Kantian argument is that because we only look at the phenomenal world and because entheogens only change the way the brain perceives incoming data, all you're doing is changing the phenomenal world. The noumenal world, the world without perception, the world as it actually objectively is, one, if it is even there in the first place, but every time I bring that argument up, people get weird. The fact is that noumenal world, by definition, is inaccessible. I don't know, first off, the reality that actually exists without perception, without phenomenology, or a phenomenon, I don't think is accessible to humans because we live in phenomenon. Everything is interpretive data into the brain. And two, I don't even know if it's there. Because if I can't actually witness it or engage with it, fuck if I know it's actually there. It could be being constructed as we sit here. We could be in a hologram. Fuck if I know. But again, we can get into all sorts of high thinking if we want. But again, I do think there's a question here about the use of entheogens, especially with the recent research they've done about them with treatment of various mental disorders. Iboga for alcoholism, MDMA for the use of depression, psilocybin for the use of depression, like a number of things. What is the sound of one hand clapping, Inky?
Are functioning at their best, generally speaking, when you are not under the effects of a drug. Your rhetoric around this subject and use of the word escapism isn't really the best way to make this argument. I disagree. I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think there's anything incorrect about what I've said.
Smug.
Certainly. Yeah, when I was super depressed, I used drug and alcohol to escape my misery, and it did not help. No, it doesn't. It does not. I'm glad that you're referring to that in the past tense. To clarify, are you saying escapism in all forms is bad or that over-reliance on it is a problem? For example, occasional weed use to deal with PTSD symptoms or something. If you have listened to what I have said, do I seem like I would have an issue with occasional weed use to deal with PTSD symptoms? You all know what addicts look like. Well, people who don't are usually themselves in denial about their state of being. Unfortunately. It's quite evident from the outside. when a person is dependent. And dependency doesn't have to be a bad thing, but dependency on escapism, that I think is. I wonder if people would be this mad if you made the same argument about alcohol. Well, alcohol is a drug. I am making the same argument about alcohol. The chat get very mad about this. What do you think of 12-step programs? I think there are serious issues with them. That's what I've heard. I don't know much about it, though.
I don't know why you guys aren't spamming Smuggies.
Addictive is harmful? Yeah, it's really dumb. Of course weed can be addictive. Just because it's not chemically addictive doesn't mean that it can't be psychologically addictive. I mean, it literally, it affects your brain state. Of course it can be addictive. It directly, that's what drugs do. They directly affect your brain state. Do you think your comments...
I can tell you Nerd King really simply is that he's got a fairly negative view of the hippies and their lack of actual use. If you go back and watch our Integral series, you can actually see why I think they're basically useless.
What was the question?
This conversation makes me think Vosh has never lived through or even heard of things that were in the 60s. I mean, he's like younger than me. He's like 27. I'm just going to say, like, very simply, like, fuck the 60s, fuck the hippies. The pre-post fallacy led to a lot of problems because when you have someone like a Harvard professor say, you know, drop acid, whatever, and then you're having a bunch of 18-year-old kids have it, their developmental levels are radically different. You're talking about post-conventional and pre-conventional who agree that they're both unconventional. It's a mess. Yeah, no, fuck the hippies. I think there was stuff that came out of that time period that was good. I also think that it reified a lot of problems, and it's also where we got TERFs. Because second wave feminism did a lot of good things and did a lot of dumb shit. And then we fell asleep on TERFs for another 30 years, despite the fact that the transsexual empire was written in goddamn early 80s. Never gonna forgive the left for that one. Motherfuckers just went to sleep on that and fucking screwed over trans people.
Apply to a significant portion of drug users in chat, or is your community more likely? No, I think it's just a couple of people self-reporting by being indignant and angry about what I said. I don't think this community has a disproportionate number of drug users. There are a lot of people with unhealthy relationships with drugs, though, 100%. No, it does not, Night Sky. I could smoke weed on stream if I wanted to. I worry your take might lead accidental credence to stigma around weed and drug usage. No, I don't think anything that I said here was, like, hasty or poorly measured. I think that my statements on this are reasonable and measured. Frankly, with the Zoomers, especially in the coastal states, you people could do for a little bit more aversion to weed, in my personal opinion. Just a little bit more, you know? It's like how people from the previous generations, like a third of them were alcoholics. Like, yeah, I feel like a little more of an aversion to drugs and alcohol could actually maybe be beneficial culturally. Do you think drugs chemically...
I actually think this is true. Not because I'm some prohibitionist, but that one of the major issues I've had with clients, especially the college-age clients, is the big problem you get into is because of the culture around alcohol, it leads to escalation. Like, we know this from data. Alcohol is the actual gateway drug. It's not pot, it's alcohol. And what it leads to is the use of hard drugs like cocaine and things like that. And so you'll hear stories about, like, yeah, you know, I went to this frat party and I was drinking. And not only do you have the issues of, you know, assault and things like that happen there, but also you have this escalation of usage. And so the problem I do have here is that there is an argument to be made here that alcohol and marijuana, while are perfectly fine and used on occasion, are, if used regularly or too much, or in some ways not for a medical reason, in the case of marijuana, obviously not alcohol, the reality is that there is a way in which this stuff can, you know, affect you. It may not actually derail your life or any of those crazy dare ads, but what it can do is lead people down particular paths. Like Kira just said, I didn't touch alcohol till college. I mean, I did it when I was... Never mind. 14.
Affecting your brain make the escapism more severe? What about if you played VR as escapism in a way that makes you more detached from reality now? No, I completely disagree. If you're of sound mind, any media that you consume...
Real quick, Sundrop said you should just see those Adams and everything. I don't need to because I know what it is. Marijuana cannabis didn't get made illegal because it does anything wrong. It got made illegal because it was associated with black people and because it was associated with jazz, which is also associated with black people. And it also led to, and I want to be really clear, this was due to capitalistic reasons. The DuPont Corporation put out a video called, you know, what later became Reefer Madness, was originally Tell Your Children. Essentially, that was put out as propaganda against it. So you have the combination of racism with the magic of capitalism leading to them hating on this, which is why we don't have enough research on this. Like, we're 40 years behind on cannabis research. And this is coming from a girl that uses, CBD gummies. Like, I'm not saying this stuff doesn't have a place. I deal with anxiety. I take some Cymbalta and fucking CBD gummies. I still have triggers. And it's also associated with Mexicans as well. Yes, that's true. Basically, if your skin color was past a certain tan. So, yeah. You know where I actually remember Tell Your Children from? It was actually the opening video for a full version of Mindless Self-Indulgence's song, Shut Me Up. Never gonna forgive Mindless Self-Indulgence for being led by a pedophile. God, I still like their music. F me.
Is still going to be contextualized within your present brain state, which is the thing that really matters. That's what you carry with you everywhere. It's the lens through which you see the world. Changing that brain state is the most severe and most significant kind of escapism that you can possibly engage in my opinion. Which would you say is worse, weed or cigarettes? Well, cigarettes kill way more people. So that's a pretty easy one. Can you at least acknowledge that psychedelics have recently been shown to be massively successful for use with therapy? I've heard that. I don't know how true that is.
It is true.
But again, this doesn't contradict my take. But I've heard that can be the case. I don't know the research, though. Keep in mind, though, that would be like moderate or minimal use in conjunction with therapy, which is hardly the same thing as being an addict, right?
How
would you confront other things that cause addiction that aren't necessarily drugs? Gambling, sex, and video games? I'm not in favor of making any drugs illegal. I don't know what you mean. My answer would be the same. If you're engaging in gambling, sex, or video games to the point that it's a kind of like habitual escapism or it's harming your life, then you should not do that. But it would be the same. I just think drugs are a more...
Yeah, so for all the people using the idea of breaking out of patterns and anything can be excessive, I'll say this. I'm a big fan of anything that can break you out of a pattern and allow you to live a more free, more happy, more open life. Now, can drugs do that? Arguably, yes. Can video games do that? Absolutely. There are stories I've played in video games that have broken my absolute heart open. However, those things, if used inappropriately, can also lead to more prisons. And I mean that metaphorically. This is why I'm a big fan. I'm not a big fan of using entheogens or psychedelics or hallucinogens at f***ing rave concerts and shit. Not because I don't get why it's, fun for these people and all that shit. It's actually because I find the idea insulting to the actual potential uses of personal growth. The thing that led me to Zen and therapy was basically ingesting a whole bunch of research chemicals that allowed me to step outside myself and recognize my own patterning. And yes, Chrono Trigger is based, I will fight anybody on this.
Dangerous vessel for that kind of dependent escapism, because again, they literally directly affect your brain state. How does the coffee affect your brain? Makes it go fast. How does weed affect the brain? It makes it go slow. Do you think all drugs should be legal? Yes. Wouldn't that contextualization thing kind of depend on where you spend most of your time? I know of a friend who heard some sound of real life, got reminded of an astronomer. What? No, buried fresh. No matter what contrived examples you pull out, on average, directly affecting your brain state through chemicals is going to lead to a greater degree of divorce from reality than any kind of like habitual media experience. But again, if you are obsessively consuming a piece of media to the point that it has a negative effect on your life, you should also like examine that as well. Vosh seems to assume weed doesn't have much medical use. What is with you people? I don't get it. I don't understand. I'll let chat roast you on that because they know that I never said that. Iron Mage says, like 90% of debates with chatter's hearing the first 3 words of whatever Vosh is saying and then seeing red and assuming the rest, it never gets old. Yeah. Keep in mind, there are a lot of drugs that I'm just generally opposed to any use of. Not legally, but like for health reasons. Just because I'm in favor of the consumption of heroin being legal doesn't mean that I would like say it's a good thing that you should do, A lot of drugs, of course, are just...
So... that's about it. This is obviously a clip, so there could be context missing. I know the VGGers get upset when you don't bring up context. Zena, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? I guess to summarize this, or kind of anything you didn't get a chance to bring up, I guess I want to know where your mind's at.
No, I'm generally in agreement here.
Well, you've never been a big drug person. Half the reason is because they f*** with your body in weird ways. You get like every side effect half the time.
Oh god, I've had way worse side effects from prescription medications and feelings of highness from prescription medications from my doctor for issues, for health issues that I have. It kind of turns me off from wanting to try other substances because it's not fun for me anymore. It always feels like chat skips steps, and our chat does this sometimes too, where they hear a thing and then they don't, and then they jump right to the end point. Mm-hmm. Like along the way, there is a lot of like, hey, in the context of therapy, or medical stuff. Like, no, that's that's a thing, right? Like, that's a different set of scenarios, but it feels like people just skip over that, forget that that all existed, and then arrive at the end conclusion of Vosh saying drugs are all these horrible things, and then project all sorts of, shit that we're all told about how bad drugs are in this country, right? Like, even though that's not what's happening. But no, a lot of my dealings with people too, when they try to use drugs to escape, don't have good outcomes. It usually puts people in a worse situation, or at the very least, taking much longer to figure out something, so.
Yeah, I guess my thought on this is that, again, I don't want to demonize anyone's fun, nor do I want to demonize anyone's medical or medicinal uses. I think where I'm really concerned is that a lot of the people that I would define as like addicted or escapism or whatnot would be the people where pot has become such a regular part of their day-to-day that they don't know what their life looks like without being high. We know those people. The person I mentioned as an example was one of these people. And that stuff really bothers me because at that point, the reason why an altered state can be fun is because an altered state can be a nice escapism for a few hours.
Like novel, right?
Yeah, it's novel. But if it becomes your regular thing, you're no longer escaping. You're no longer into some escape. You're no longer just doing a unnecessary level of escapism. You're also not really touching in with reality. The whole reason that thing was fun was because you were escaping reality. If you spend 14 hours a day playing fucking video games, at some point the value starts to disappear.
Right.
How to apply this framework? I mean, it's very easy. Look at the way in which this thing affects your life and ask yourself, well, one, like you said, Violet, addressing the reason for it. So why am I trying to escape? Right? Is this depression? Is this anxiety? Is this something else? But then also working on getting rid of the dependency or working on getting away from the escapism because it's keeping you from engaging. You're essentially trying to deflect or ignore the things happening in your life. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you have to do that kind of escapism. If you're someone in an abusive relationship or have abusive parents, or you're a trans kid that's stuck with like really shitty parents.
And you've got several years to move out before you can move out. Yeah.
Yeah. I get needing escapism. If you're a trans girl and you can't come out because your parents are horrible conservatives and they're just monsters, and it's easier for you to just sit in front of Call of Duty for 12 hours, I'm not gonna front on you. What I'm saying is that if you're able to get out of those situations, at some point you need to let go of the tool that's allowing you to escape and instead work on reconnecting with reality. Because there's a lot of really good shit out here. There's a lot of scary shit too. This again, I'm a Buddhist, so middle path. If you tune the guitar too tight, it breaks. If you tune it too low, it doesn't actually make a sound. Middle path. Again, this is what we're talking about.
So, Entity Violet, I almost feel like you've answered your own question pretty thoroughly, right? Here we go. My only real issue is I have problems with how to apply this framework. I agree with what Vosh is saying, but the only thing that's made it easier for me to avoid abusing my meds / use stuff in a safe way has been when not being homeless / in unsafe situations. Here, you probably need a period in here. Generally, I find material solutions or addressing the reason for escapism is the only reason it works. So yeah, at that point, you are having to address the environmental concerns, right? You are having to address the issues that are triggering you to use drugs for escapism. Like, that is the thing here. There might be more tools, like that, you might not have learned yet, but you do need to be able to address those environmental concerns. And this is why, like, we are big advocates for social change and for more systems in place to help people, right? Like, that's, if I could just make food cards super easy for everybody to have, and all you had to do is be like, hey, I want this, I would.
I need food.
All you have to do is just say, I want it. That's it. There's no checks. There's no nothing. No income. Nothing. Like, you just get it. That's all. I would super do it because if you need it, you need food, right? We just take care of the issue. And so we do get into some really rough societal issues. As far as some of the emotional stuff, we do have distorted thinking videos. There might be some tools with like the container meditation or square breathing that might help you moment to moment, right? If you're really in a spot that is struggling, maybe finding another way to reach out would be my suggestion, especially if like you're really not able to change the environmental situation right away, because a lot of people can't change that. So
Violet, your phrasing was fine. You're good.
Oh yeah, your phrasing was fine. It was more that I was trying to track where Jess was answering which part of your questions, because also your solution is accurate. Like, that is, yeah.
Do you agree with Vosh that that's irrelevant to this topic? So with that said, we're going to end this segment here. We hope to see you guys in the next one. And yeah, kill it. Bye. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.
Legomaniac 856